in times of crisis, there is a flight to quality. This is obvious. We saw yesterday a number of countries, such as Argentina, reacting very badly to the uncertainty and volatility of central financial markets. So this is to be expected. We saw yesterday some major Brazilian companies losing 20-30% of their value. So that is to be expected. Now, of course, it will also depend on the ability of policymakers in emerging economies to react. And I'm sure that there are a number of countries that have already acted in the correct way. I would also add that it also depends, obviously, on the level of integration of the different national economies with the rest of the world, and in particular with China. Do not forget that even if the situation now seems to be under control in China, and President Xi Jinping visited Wuhan this morning, still the country that is going to be most severely affected by the turmoil and outbreak is China. So countries that are trading a lot with China are going to suffer more, and trading in goods, trading in services, and receiving many tourists. These are all factors that were supportive of growth when things were going well, but now are, of course, an hindrance, a major problem.
How hard the coronavirus will hit Indonesia's economy?
Well, at this stage, I guess the government is correct in expecting a deceleration of growth, going probably below the 5% that has been the norm for the past few quarters and years. Again, it's too early to say, but what we know for sure is that China and Indonesia is less integrated with China than other emerging economies. This in terms of export, even if of course China is the largest trading partner for both the import and exports, but there are other countries that in Southeast Asia in particular are more vulnerable to the slowdown. This is also true for tourism. Again, it is true that the number of tourists from China visiting Indonesia has grown very rapidly over the past few years, but the percentage of tourists from China in the total arrivals in Indonesia is lower than in Thailand, for instance, or in other ASEAN countries. So we can expect a slowdown, but as we know, the experience of Indonesia in the past few years is that growth is supported by domestic consumption. And at this stage, I don't think we can expect, obviously, we will see a softening of domestic consumption, but not a major crisis and a major fall. I guess it will be interesting and very instructive to see the numbers emerging on new car sales for February. This may point to some weak points in the outlook.
So the main drivers of our economy is consumption. And do you think that how bad this coronavirus will impact our consumption for this full year, 2020?
We can expect a major deceleration in the first quarter, I think, at this stage, even if, as I say, it's going to probably be less dramatic than in other countries, including in ASEAN. But then I think it's fair to expect a recovery in the second and especially the third and fourth quarter of both domestic consumption and exports, with also a positive impact on investment. Investment remains a bit of a weak point. A weak spot for the Indonesian economy is lower than in comparable emerging economies. So I think it is probably right now there's the moment for companies and policymakers to take a more aggressive approach at investment. So going back to your question, I think that the domestic consumption slowdown will be concentrated in the first quarter. As we see the numbers from February, we will get a clearer idea. But then things are going to improve over the year. So I guess the expectation now, the forecast we have is of growth for 2020 a bit lower than 5%. I think that we may have to revise those figures as the year advances for obvious reasons, because we don't yet know the final impact of this COVID-19 crisis on the major developed economies. But more or less, we are not talking for Indonesia about a recession. That is for sure.